When a woman and her daughter packed up and left the marital home to start again in a new property, it seemed like another story of a failed marriage and a potential rebooting of the erstwhile husband and wife stories. Obviously, I wouldn't be telling this story if it was the all too common one of a marriage simply going down the tubes. Instead, this story is the similarly common one of a man losing control of his partner and not being willing to let that happen. There had been warning signs, but by the time further action was about to be taken, it was tragically too late. This is Murder of Crows.
Say that you're ready, but you won't like it. You say that you're ready, but you won't like it. Silence all the crows, lining up in little rows. A sudden chill surrounds me. Silence all the crows, see come out and say you're old. A sudden chill.
It's a tale as old as time, by which I mean this time, which has been in my cupboard for years. Other brands are available, best before 2018. And it's to 2018 we go, and to the county of Shropshire. This story features a remarkable, unbelievable young lady who refused to give in to the events surrounding her. But also it's the story of the crumbling marriage of Jack and Cheryl Hooper. But the beating heart of the story is young Georgia, who was 14 at the time and was an absolute star and an absolute warrior that you cannot help but admire. But before I wax sycophantic about her, let's rewind a bit. Andrew Hooper was a 46-year-old farmer in Shropshire, England. He was known to his friends, I'm very surprised he had friends, as Jack. I don't know why. Maybe at some point he had a car on his head. And if not, maybe he should have. But anyway, he'd been married to Cheryl Gabriel Hooper for 18 months, but their marriage was already on the rocks. After issues and niggles, it seems one of the key incidents had been Jack's refusal to attend the funeral of one of Cheryl's friends with her. It was said that he was having financial issues with the farm, which is unfortunate and difficult, but does not excuse his later actions one iota. She made up her mind to leave him, and she and Georgia moved from the 400-acre farm to a property on Farmer's Gate in Newport. Now Jack could not or would not believe that he was the arsehole that had caused or been in any way responsible for the breakdown of his marriage, so it must have been his wife's fault. This therefore convinced him that she must have been having an affair. Already angered by her leaving, he was pushed still further after finding out that she had just started a relationship with a man called Ian Priest, who she had met during an organised shoot at the Hooper farm. In ordinary circumstances, one could think of this as serendipity, but in view of what transpired after the fact, it was unfortunately more like serendipity. On the 26th of January 2018, the night of the tragic attack, Hooper had tracked Cheryl to a pub in Wolverhampton. When he showed up, Cheryl spoke to her parents on the phone saying, "Jack has followed me to the pub. I think he's put a tracker on the car." Cheryl's dad sensed the danger and advised her to go to the police immediately, but she brushed it off. After ensuring her mother that she would pick her up the next morning, Cheryl ended the call. But this was the last time she would talk to her parents. Upon returning from the pub, Georgia got out of the car when she saw that Jack was at their home. Then all hell broke loose. From a distance of less than 2 meters, 2 shots were fired from a shotgun directly into the car. Cheryl was hit in the arm and the neck. She never stood a chance. Georgia screamed that her mother had been shot and the alarm was soon raised, but Hooper fled the scene. He later turned the gun on himself in a failed suicide attempt that left him with severe facial injuries. During the court case that followed, the level of warning signs and failed opportunities to intervene were laid bare. One notable revelation was that after separating from his first wife, he broke into the home she shared with her new partner, wearing surgical gloves and armed with a knife. He then threatened to kill the couple. After this incident, he was charged with aggravated burglary, but was ultimately convicted of affray, for which he received a suspended sentence. Safe to say, something of a red flag there. Hooper's controlling ways during the relationship, and particularly after its breakdown, led to Cheryl having several contacts with the police. She had reported several instances of his behaviour, many of which she considered to be intimidating. The police raised safeguarding issues, but there were delays on being able to meet up in person with Cheryl, and Cheryl had reported to them on the 16th of January that there had been no further incidents regarding Jack. Now, on the 25th of January, an officer from West Mercia Police met with Cheryl at her home and took details of his intimidation. It was reported that from her information, her concerns did not amount to any actual criminal offences by Hooper, but the very next day, she was shot and killed by him. While Hooper held a firearms license, several suicide attempts in the months before the fatal shooting led to Hooper signing over all his registered firearms to a friend. No one knew there was a rusty old unregistered shotgun still in Hooper's possession. Hooper had been unable to speak since his failed suicide attempt after the shooting of Cheryl, and used a keyboard to communicate during court proceedings. Newly released footage shows the moment he points to the word yes when asked during questioning if he was responsible for the shooting of his estranged wife.
He's suffered terrible injuries. He's unable to speak. He hasn't got a mouth. He hasn't got a nose.
Is your name Andrew Jonathan Hooper? Yes. And also present is your solicitor. Are you responsible for the death of your wife, Cheryl Gabriel Hooper, on the 26th of January 2018?
Can you be more accurate? Yes.
During the case, he maintained that he only intended to scare Cheryl, but admitted that 2 live rounds were fired, but he was adamant that the gun had accidentally discharged. The judge in the case, Mark Wall QC, called bullshit on this defence. The judge said, "This was not a spur-of-the-moment killing. It was one that you had planned in the hours leading up to it. I am sure it was your intention to kill." He was convicted of the murder of his wife and ordered to serve a minimum of 31 years in prison. While this is the justice system working within its confines to provide justice, it's my view that the fact that he failed in his suicide and ended up with facial injuries, losing his nose and his ability to speak, and needs to use a wheelchair, this is a better form of justice for this controlling narcissist who could not give up control. I will now, for the remainder of this video, unapologetically concentrate on Georgia Gabriel Hooper, whose behaviour and conduct in the aftermath of the shooting saw her not just surviving but thriving. But before she could begin healing, she needed to ensure that Hooper faced justice. She knew in that moment she had to be strong and make sure the police caught and convicted her mum's killer. "I was in shock. Nobody expects that," she said. "I knew I was the only witness. I knew that ultimately I was the only person that could get him put away. I knew I had to do that to get justice for myself and for my mum." She spoke with a mature wisdom and understanding about the nature of the relationship between her mother and her stepfather, saying of the insidious abuse, "He was incredibly coercively controlling. If we went out, we'd get the silent treatment. He isolated her. It was a lot easier for her to not go out, to not have to deal with his reaction. He was threatening and intimidating. He was a big guy and my mum was only small. The violence wasn't needed. He was incredibly intelligent and was able to tie my mum up in knots." She said the first time Hooper was actually physically abusive towards Cheryl was the day that he took her life. Speaking about coercive control, Georgia said, "It's incredibly well hidden. It's really difficult to pick up on different signs. You have to look out for the subtleties and slight changes in people's behaviour. There really is no black and white. However, they may start to go out less. They may fall out with friends, become more isolated, and seem less like themselves. It is really difficult to see, and sometimes it really is too late. It's not something that's talked about, especially in the countryside, where there's still some very backward views on domestic abuse. Not a lot of people know what coercive control is. It's like carbon monoxide poisoning. You can't see it, you can't smell it, and you can't taste it until it's too late. Every situation is different, and each comes with their own risks. But there is a life after abuse. It doesn't always end the way it did for my mum. Georgia is a remarkable young lady and a credit to her mother, who would be so proud of the young woman she has become. She speaks out on domestic abuse and coercive control. I think Judge Mark Wall summed up Georgia's maturity and strength during the case, saying, "The way in which you have conducted yourself throughout this trial, which must have been extremely difficult for you, has been admirable and awe-inspiring. Your mother would, I have no doubt, been immensely proud of the way you have dealt with a tragic and difficult process." This video is dedicated to the memory of Cheryl Hooper and to the continued healing and future success of Georgia. Thank you for watching another episode of Murder of Crows. I'm Steve, and I'll see you when I see you.
Say that you're ready, but you won't like it, you say